Welcome to this week's chapter of Unmute Yourself. And this week we have a fantastic conversation with John, who goes by the name of Zudlow. John is a writer and artist, and you might find him washing boats or guiding tourists in deepest, darkest Alaska, or herding goats in the mountains of Italy. He might be teaching English in Taiwan whilst simultaneously studying Mandarin himself. If I had teenage kids, John would be someone who I'd hope they would reach out to for inspiration, as to someone who is thinking outside of the box. I certainly wish I'd have had John's critical thinking skills when I was his age. He's deeply sensitive whilst also extremely tenacious and courageous. He's an intrepid adventurer and traveler, and yet he also very much enjoys creating his own sacred spaces and enjoying his own time to go within. He's a truly beautiful human, and I hope you enjoy his wisdom, his being rooted in truth, and his vulnerability as much as I cherish that. So, without further ado, enjoy. John,
My,
welcome. It's so
thank you.
lovely. It's so lovely to connect with you. We've been wanting to do this for so long, haven't we?
I was actually thinking today about when we met and I couldn't remember
It
or
was
how.
on my It was on my old Instagram account, so it would have been
Yeah,
Susie
yeah.
Makes and
Makes.
not, yeah, Susie Makes. And somehow, because I was kind of very much into daily sketching and
Hmm.
illustrations, and you just kind of popped up like as a suggested kind of an account to follow, and there you were. And I think it was around about 20, I want to say 2016, 2017. We've kind of been loosely in contact.
Oh
I'm
my
pretty
God.
certain.
Then yeah,
Maybe
like I
we
said,
could.
I couldn't remember the beginning. I was just like, oh, it's just Susie. Like she's always just sort of
Yeah,
been there.
just there, just
Yeah.
yes. Like God, really. Yeah. Oh
Like
dear.
Susie,
Okay.
the voice in the back of my head.
It's just so precious to connect. It really is.
Mm.
So I'm gonna fire off some questions. And you're gonna follow the nudges of your heart
Okay.
in your answers. So I know that you started off in Maine. That's where where your kind of your life started off, and yet you say in your website that you were wanting to chase something more real. Was there a specific moment that you remember when you realized I've got to move on, I've got to go? And then what fears were there to in order to do that?
So I don't think it was a moment. Um, I had always wanted to like go travel the world, see the world, all that. And it just sort of built over time. Um, but one thing I always point out about Maine is it's a lovely place, it's beautiful. And this might have just been where I was growing up, but I just remember experiencing a lot of loneliness there. And even now, when I go back, there's sort of a vibe about it that I think draws a lot of people to it. Because they have the fantasy about going to Maine, living in a cabin and writing, or going to Maine and going to the beach. But once you get there, there's sort of like a cold, stagnant electricity to the place,
Right.
um, which I've felt kind of all along that Atlantic coast. So that's why I'm more Pacific now these days. I like
Right.
the Pacific Ocean's energy better. But it was just like a slowly building thing for me, almost to the point of just accepting that, oh yeah, I'm gonna leave. Like it's not
Mm,
even a decision, it's just what I'm gonna do.
mm,
Um, and it was a little scary because, I had my community that I had been with for 25 years, and I was just leaving that and starting something new completely from scratch. But I would say like the excitement kind of trumped the fears.
mm, mm.
Oh, sorry, I said the T word. The excitement overpowered the fears.
Might have to edit that out.
Yeah, bleep that out.
Yeah. Yeah, the excitement and the fear can feel very similar in the body.
Hmm. And
Mm.
it's a very, yeah, I like that. Someone once told me that fear is how you know you're still alive,
Mhm. Right.
because like you're still excited. Um,
Mm.
but Maine's an incredibly safe place, and I went to India with my dad in 2009.
Wow.
And when he travels, he's safe, but he's very devil may care about, you know, let's go for a walk and, let's try this food that is being suspiciously sold out of a cart with no food safety practices. And so that I feel like that kind of set the tone for my travel
Mm.
experiences. Um, and just not caring so much about safety. And I feel like a lot of bravery or strength um isn't about, yeah, I think this is going to happen and I'm going to be strong enough to get through that. A lot of it for me has just been not thinking about what might happen. you know
Mm.
the 1 in 10,000 chance that a piano is going to fall on my head when I walk down the street. I just don't think about that. And I think if you get stuck in that thought process, you start to like, you limit how you move,
Yeah.
and you kind of start to control yourself more and repress yourself. And um I don't want to say like, oh, I've never been like that. It's always been easy, because it hasn't. I actually struggle with being afraid daily. I just try my best to sort of like move past it and push that to the background.
Yeah, where we can kind of recognize the fear, but also then very much have autonomy over it, and that so
Mm.
it's not kind of running the shop, you know.
Acknowledge
It's
it,
kind of
but
it's kind of
don't.
magic. Yeah.
Yeah, words of magic.
Yeah, yes, they are. Abracadabra. Yeah, and all of
Tell
that.
them.
Before I go on to the next question, I am fascinated by the energy that you spoke about that you felt in Maine. It's funny because I had a fascinating conversation with ChatGPT about the energy of where I live in Waterloo in Liverpool,
Really?
and the conversation was it was hard to read, but it also confirmed a lot of what I feel that in my body. I just thought it was just really interesting to know. Anyway, um,
I
so
want to come back to that
oh
because
yes,
I
please
feel like
do.
place and sleep, how you sleep in a place tells you a lot about the place.
Um,
And I was living in Idaho, and getting the worst sleep of my life. Like you said, like panic attacks at night, nightmares, sleep paralysis, all of this was
wow.
happening. And I was like, this is bad. This is bad land. Like there's something wrong here. And I
Right.
told my manager at it where I worked, and she just goes, oh, yeah, it's haunted here. Everyone knows that. It's full of ghosts because in the 1800s, there were native people living here and they all just got slaughtered. And then they built a town on top of it. And I said,
Dear me.
oh, I got to get out of here. And I left 2 weeks later. So
That's so interesting. And so it would benefit from someone going in and doing some clearing on sites like that
a lot of
would be,
clearing. You're gonna
yeah.
need a lot of Palo Santo for that
Dear
town.
me. That's so interesting. And isn't it interesting just to come back to the body on these things, to trust the
Hmm.
intuition, which is been such a journey for me.
Hmm.
Um, so coming back to your travels, a lot of people say, I want to travel the world. Yeah, I'm gonna go. And yet a lot of people are also held back from doing that as a solo traveler, particularly. Was there any fear of the unknown? And if so, how did you work through that? You have touched on it in a way.
Yeah, it's complicated because everyone has limitations that they can work within. And, I realize, I acknowledge that I've been fairly lucky when it comes to money. Like I've always had enough to do what I want to do. And part of that is, there's no self-made man. I've had a little help, and I don't want to say like everyone's scared of not having enough money, but just do it because that's not always the case. Um, what I do is early on when I started looking at teaching English, I looked at a school in Boston and I calculated how much it was going to cost me to go to school here with rent and transportation and tuition. And I calculated it out and I got a number. And I was like, okay, let's see if we can do better. And I looked at international options and I found the tuition abroad was actually lower. The cost of living was lower, transportation was lower. And so instead of getting certified to teach English in Boston, I did it in France. And I spent about the same amount of money, but I was able to do that in France instead of
Oh, that's
Boston.
magic. Right.
Yeah.
Well,
So
yeah,
what
I
I
love
would
that.
say is, you know, um, so I would say like, what are you spending now? Because, everyone says they don't have enough money to travel. Granted, some people don't. And, this actually I'm realizing makes me kind of sound like a privileged bastard. But I just think, in our daily lives, we spend a lot of money. And if we can take that money that we're spending and sort of push it in a different direction, um, I think you can do a lot more things than you want. So like when I wanted to travel, and so I decided to travel and work. And so I'll find a place I want to go, and then I'll get a job there, and then I'll go and work. And that working there kind of funds my being there, instead of spending a bunch of money on a 2-week trip. I don't know. I found it's a little more sustainable. I mean, that's why I live in
Mm.
Alaska and not just visit here.
Yeah, and so intention is everything there, isn't it, John? Your intention
Mhm.
is kind of behind that is so vital.
Yeah.
I love that.
And I also realized that's what's important to me. And I think that's
Yeah.
what's made it happen because it's important to me. Um,
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of money. And if I was in a more stable situation, I would have more. Um, and every now and then I look at my bank account and I'm like, that's it. That's what I got to show at 33. But then I think about like what I've spent it on and all the travels and the people I've met, and I think that's important to me. Um, so yeah, like what's important to you? I also realize when I give advice like that, most people are just looking to take a trip and not uproot their entire life, say goodbye to their family and everyone they know and relocate.
I think it's a sense that we can make anything happen when we believe we can make it happen, and when you
True.
trust the process.
Hmm.
It's I think that's really really important. It's what your values are, and to you, your value is travel. That to you is your freedom. That to you is your abundance. So it doesn't really matter what's in our bank account. It's what is abundance around me in any given moment, and I feel like you excel in that, in spades.
Mm.
um you are a fantastic writer and artist. I
Thank
always
you.
feel like so like I bubble up with joy with anything you write and illustrate and create.
Thank you.
But oh, I really mean it. And do you ever experience kind of imposterism when it comes to calling yourself an artist or a writer? A big
Oh,
one
all the
for those
time.
of us on Substack.
Yeah, all the time. You know, I look at I've been reading some Hemingway lately, and he talks about living in Paris, and he's like, and then I wrote an article for a newspaper and it was okay, but it paid the bills. And I was like, how are you paying bills writing articles? What were the bills? Like $10 for rent, 50 cents for a cup of whiskey. And I think it's a different world now. And Carrie Bradshaw was never real, but the fact that the whole show was based around she writes one article a week and she's buying Manolo Blahniks, obviously unrealistic, but that took place in a world where that was like not, I think maybe it wasn't my time, but like maybe not too far off the mark. That you could sort of move to Manhattan and make it. And I mean, even the millionaires now they live in Brooklyn. They don't even live in Manhattan.
Mm.
So, um, I get a lot of imposter syndrome reading or watching about writers who've made it, whatever that means. I think the way I counter imposter syndrome, is sort of lying to myself as I'm lying to other people, where, I'll introduce myself as an artist. And I think when your body hears your body say that, it's like, oh, you know what? I think I am actually. And so kind of just claiming the identity and
Yeah.
not shying from it. I hung my art at a kombucha brewery a few months ago,
Yeah, I loved
and
that.
it was no gallery opening. Um, but I did the work, it was something. And my friends came and bought my prints, which I adored them for
Oh,
that. But I don't know, just sort of kind of making the identity yourself
yes.
and then just
Yeah.
accepting that. I think, I mean, like, you know what? Yeah, that's what I am.
Yeah.
Um,
Re Redefining success as well, I think, for what success mean for me. Yeah, rewriting the script for ourselves.
mhm,
You speak on about a literary agent's rejection, and that really pushed you to work on your craft, on your writing, on your art, and in a way that perhaps would not have happened otherwise. And I feel like that's such a fantastic example of how we can use rejection or a feeling of failure or not being good enough as a real force for as a real force for good and a real kind of like
mhm.
um, uh, uh, we use it to our own ends. I would love for you to speak on that a little on how we can use it as a force for to galvanize us to keep at it.
So it's so funny because that was over 10 years ago. And um, what I did in response was maybe not what she was recommending. Um,
So do tell.
I think she meant take a writing course, honestly.
Right.
I got really excited when I got her rejection because it was my favorite rejection. She said, we talked about your work with the senior editors, and we just decided it's not a good fit for us. And I was just like, you talked about me in a
Yeah.
meeting? Like
Yeah.
in a high-rise building, my story was talked about and they discussed its merits and they said it's just not there. And you know what? Thank God, because looking back on my work, I'm just honestly embarrassed because I did get an early start and I was writing novels when I was 16 and they were not good, Susie. I'm really glad
I
that
I
that
don't know. I would like to read them, John.
maybe I always think that maybe someday after I die, a nefarious secretary will take all of those old manuscripts and publish them posthumously. And I won't be around to wallow in that shame. But I hope those who are left behind enjoy it. They were not good. And a lot of that actually stemmed from I didn't know what the hell I was talking about, which I kind of read into her rejection. And I was like, you know what? She's right. I need to experience a little bit more of the world. So I'm just going to do that for the next 10 years. And I've had all kinds of really cool experiences. And I think all the time in the back of my head, and I think this is also why I'm not traditionally published, is that the whole time in the back of my head, I was like, okay, I'm building something. Like I'm working on something. I'm going to distill this into novels someday. I'm going to make this worth it in a capitalistic sense. And so every time I'm driving to the Arctic Circle and I'm like, okay, I could work this in some material somewhere. Like now I know what it's like to be really, really cold. Whereas if I had written that when I was 16, would have just been like, it was really, really cold, whatever that feels like. I've experienced hunger, I've experienced heartbreak, I've experienced love, I've experienced um being drunk on a city street at 3 in the morning trying to make my way home. Like I've gone through so much and I did live a very sheltered upbringing because my parents really cared about me and they did their best to keep me safe. And I'll never fault them for that. And one of the unintentional side effects of that was I had very little experience in the material world.
Mm.
Um, and I think it's because of that. Like my early writing was very idealistic. It was very, and the unintentional side effect of idealistic writing is that you actually end up writing very flat characters because you're trying
Mm.
so hard to maintain that pristine view of the world or how the world should be. You're not gonna you're not gonna write a crack addict. You're not gonna write,
Mm.
somebody who double crosses their partner, and you're not gonna write um, your main character going into a huge depression and not doing anything for 5 weeks because you haven't
Mm.
experienced what that would look like in a person. So I think a lot of I'll call it the 10-year project has been kind of going into those ups and downs and figuring out what that's like in a world that's not the Buddha's garden.
Mm.
Um,
Yes. Mm.
very much that. Which again, you know, I appreciate how much they protected me. This was
Mm.
just the yang to that yin.
And it's all beautiful. And even in those moments when we feel like we can't take life anymore, we also look back at some point and that softens and we see the beauty in it all and the
Mhm.
lessons in it all and the resilience that's born out of that. The yeah, it's also all the seasons are so powerful. And I relate to what you say there because I too had a very similar backdrop, and it was really like it was because of the belief system that I was in. I You kind of go through life with your the stabilizers on your bicycle. You don't really ever get to learn what it is to fall off the bike, and then to learn from that, get back on the bike. So
Mhm.
there's a lot. So yeah, I really love that you spoke to that.
Mm. So actually, what you said about the training wheels on the bike is exactly what I've been thinking about recently with creating. And
Mm.
I've been reading this great book. It's taking me forever because about every 3 pages there's a writing exercise. So I'm like, oh, I got to stop and do this. Um,
Right.
and it's really taken months to get halfway through this book. And it's all about kind of the right and the left side of your brain.
Right.
And as you know, the left side controls the right arm and the right side controls the left arm. That's like the basic neuroscience of it. As for the function of left and right, that's a little more nebulous. And neuroscientists are still trying to figure out exactly why our brains are split in half. But I'll give you a little rundown on what has been determined is that the two halves are, I could be wrong. This is what I've inferred and figured out. They're actually running separately. So we almost have like two consciousnesses living inside us.
Mm.
And they work separately, but they also can communicate to each other. Um, and I read that there was a man who had the connection severed, and as he was picking like a shirt with his right hand in the closet, his left hand went and just grabbed a different shirt, and he was like, "I didn't do that." And so it's almost like we have two people in us, and those people work together in an ideal case. Um, and in an unideal case, they conflict. And so,
Mm.
in general, the right side of our brain is a lot sloppier, crazier, a little more whimsical, a little more magical. And that's kind of where patterns are processed and kind of like large scale patterns over time. So if something just doesn't feel right, there's a chance that the right side of your brain is like, I've seen this before. I've seen what this looks like. I'm kind of making some connections. I don't like this, but I can't put it into words. People always say, "Oh, I just can't put it into words," because the words are happening on the left side. And so you
Mm.
have like all these labels existing here, and the concepts are existing here. And creativity happens on the right side with your left hand. Um, so that's why a lot of times, like you have these really creative people, we call them whimsical. Um, their spaces are typically like a little messier. They're they're a little crazier.
Don't
They're
look at
usually
mine,
like
remember?
like you've seen this. I've cleaned it up for the video, but
It's a
it's a lot
creative
more
mess.
usually. Yeah, yeah. And it's well, here's the thing. It's messy because there's stuff everywhere and like all this um it's not ordered because ordering happens over here with the language. And so we say, okay, this pile is books I'm going to read. This pile is books I've read. This pile is sci-fi. This pile is fantasy. And those are all labels that we're applying as we order. Um,
Mm.
but, you know, I could also have like these books sort of feel like books you would read at a beach. And that's all right brain stuff. Like, kind of like the vibe is this and that. Okay, so I bring that all up because it ties in with perfectionism, which
Mm.
I've been kind of thinking about lately, and like our upbringings, um, very religious, very, this is the right way to do things. And if you don't do it this way, you're gonna go to hell. And
Yep. Very
and
good,
that's
bad,
not
right,
even,
wrong.
yep. A lot of times it's not even, don't don't cheat somebody. Don't lie to someone you love. Don't um I don't know, don't I'm blanking on morals. Yikes.
Mm.
Very like
Hurt
very
anyone?
materially moral things.
Mm.
A lot of times it's things like I probably couldn't get into church like this. I'd have to button one more up. It's very specific limitations on expression and also making mistakes. Because, there's no room to make mistakes when everything's being written down and accounted for, and for some reason will be played on a large screen on Judgment Day. I mean, that's going to take a long time to watch all that.
Mm.
Um, but so because of that, I think I was afraid to do things wrong the first time. And
Mm.
then I started learning about the act of creation in people and how we create. And okay, in the sort of very religious Christian worldview creation story, um, God made everything and he made it perfect the first time. So any deviation that happens after that, well, that's not true because God made everything perfect immediately on the first day. And, you know, I still have faith, but it's definitely a lot more. I don't think any of us know exactly how the universe was created. We
Mm.
weren't there. So I'm open-minded as to how that creation happened. But as for the creation story, I think that influenced how I thought about creativity. Because now if I create something, well, it's got to be perfect on the first try, because that's the perfect act of creation. And then I started learning about other creation myths, like for example, in Greek mythology, the world isn't created out of nothing, it's created out of chaos. And so you have all this like chaotic energy and matter just kind of undirected. And then the creators will sort of order it into kind of more concentrated shapes. Same is true in Alaskan Native mythology. Like there was just a lot going on, and then the raven kind of put things together in how they should be.
Huh.
And I mean, even in Christianity, there's movements now in thought where it's accepted that the world wasn't created from nothing, but maybe there was chaos or there was a world before this one that got blown up or whatever. So I think that's a nice little concession to make. But
Yeah.
I think that influences how we think about creativity and how we think about learning and making mistakes.
Mm.
Um, and in dating, um, there's sort of this mythology in the Christian sphere where it's a success if the first person you date is the one you marry.
Mm.
And you don't want to mess that up because then you're dating someone else's future spouse. But I'm like, we have to make mistakes. Like
Mm.
we have to have that room for mistakes and growth because the most boring people in the world have never made a mistake. And
Mm.
I think it's life's so much more interesting when you let yourself get messy and make a
Oh,
mess
yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah.
Um,
Messy action. Messy action all the way.
Messy action, love.
Mm.
Yeah, so that's kind of how I think about creativity now. I don't sit down to a blank page anymore. Oh, these were my notes for today.
Oh, I love
Just sort
that.
of everywhere.
A
And
mind map.
yeah, it's a mind map.
Mm.
And a lot of what I do now, I have an inner editor. And as I'm creating, I sort of tell myself, I have to tell myself, I'm like, no one else is seeing this right now. Like, it doesn't matter. Sometimes I'll write something that I don't even agree with. But I'm like, that came to me, and so I'm gonna write it down and put it on paper and see how it feels.
Oh, I
And
love that.
if I don't like it, big shocker, I can just delete it. It
Yes.
doesn't have to be perfect on the first try because no one's watching. And this
Mm.
space belongs to you. And that's kind of why I've been, I think, more guarded with my creativity these days because I'm trying to purge out that judgment that I have. People
Mm.
talk about play, like when children play, there's no judgment. And as soon as you bring judgment in, the play ends.
Mm.
Yes, and not no, but. So with creativity, creativity always happens in a sense of play. And I think even, if you want to go back to like the Christian creation story, um, it's almost like God starts with, I think, fish, then he goes on to birds, then he goes on to pe mammals, and then eventually he gets around to people. And even growing up, I was like, well, he was probably like figuring out what he wanted to do, you know, and kind of slowly making his way there. Um, and so that's kind of what I've been trying to do in my spaces lately is I'm like, I think I kind of want to move the couch over to that side of the room, but I'm not sure. What am I doing? I'm just going to move it and see how it feels. Like I don't have to evaluate every single thing I'm about to do. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah,
Mm.
in creative spaces, just like I've been trying to play more and sketch literally the dumbest thing I can
Mm.
think of because it doesn't matter and no one's watching.
Mm.
So I have one novel right now that's just for me, and it's I always kind of wanted to do sort of a large scale space exploration Western kind of deal. And no one has seen it, and probably no one will see it. But I've just been dumping every single random. Okay, what if one of those characters turns into a skeleton and dies for no reason? You know what? I'm just gonna write that and see what happens. And then it started unfolding. I was like, oh, okay, this is actually good material. Um, And so, yeah, I have one novel that's just for me, and no one's watching. So whatever happens, happens, and I don't even care.
Mm. Oh, I love all of that. I love that the play is, and I feel like this is where we're coming back to more and more as humans, that play is the productivity because it's in the play that we enter the flow state, and then in the flow state,
Mhm.
that's where the magic happens. Um, but we can be sometimes forcing, grappling, fighting, all
Yep.
of the, I'm really struggling with this instead of how can I turn this
Calm
into
down.
play? Because that's then when all of
Mhm.
the good stuff is there. It's so, so beautiful. I love
And
that.
I hate that that's been co-opted by capitalism.
Oh, tell me more.
Well, you mentioned that productivity happens when we play,
Right.
you know?
Yes. Yeah.
And I think of like ping pong tables in the office.
Right.
I'm like, I'm sorry, what? You commodified play.
Oh dear. Yeah.
And I also think a lot about that with art is I went to a play last night, and I was just thinking like, okay, if you're gonna produce a play, you probably have to like price the tickets and make sure that it all works out. And then I was like, what am I doing? Like, isn't the point of art to make it good and to make good art? Um, but even I get in my head sometimes. I'm like, I've got to commodify this. I've got to make a novel that'll sell and that fits the market.
Mm.
Which I mean, a girl's got to eat something. Like you have to make money. But no, I've noticed cap internalized capitalism sneaking in through the
Mm.
past few decades, or I should
Mm.
say, past few millennia.
Mm.
No one just sits down and makes a basket. It's got
Yeah.
to be like, it's my basket business on Etsy, which is
Mm.
great. But I don't know. Sometimes I think we just got to do something for us.
Yes. And daily,
Hmm.
to seek out the joy daily, I think is just so important.
What are
Oh,
sorry, go
oh
ahead.
no, 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 go on.
I was just gonna ask, like, do you have practices these days where you just sort of engage in whimsy just for you?
It's funny you should ask that because I used to sketch daily and I kept daily illustration. I had journals. I've got them all on my shelf there, illustrated journals, and I was looking at them just the other week. I was sorting through them and I got rid of all of the journals that were just full of crap and all of the pain and the angst and the hurt and the sadness. And I've now just got all of the joy of the sketching journals. And I would love to get back to that, to daily sketching. Um, as regards right now, how do I tap into the joy right now? It's funny because I've been creating a little more in the last couple of weeks, just like kind of getting out all of my paper ephemera and
Mhm.
just
Love
messing
ephemera.
about, all the glue and the scissors and the
Yeah.
colored pens and it's like it's chaos here right now. So yes, and also walking for me to get out into nature is particularly, I always used to think I was a beach girl. And more I'm realizing no, I need to be around the trees and the forests. Is where it's at for me at the
You're
moment.
inland.
Um, how do you tap into your inner child each day?
So, um, it's been very much journaling for me lately.
Mm.
And I was talking to a friend recently, and she was talking about how sometimes journaling very much funnels into I woke up, I had two eggs, and then I went to work. Work was okay, and this and that. And I experienced the exact same thing. Like, I don't want to sit down and write what I did today. So
Mm.
I have been journaling lately, where I'll sit down. That's Gilchrist, he's a clown. I give Gilchrist a little stick of incense and I put on some music, I pour a cup of coffee, and that's my space. So now that the space
Mm.
exists, um, I can sort of engage in journaling my thoughts and feelings. So it's no longer, what happened today, it's now how am I feeling today. So I'll do a mind map with no intentions, just sort of writing words and bubbles and drawing lines and slowly figuring out how I feel. And then from that, I'll start to just write prose. And these days I write in large type Courier, um, no paragraphs, no indentations, just like weaving a rug. And I try as much as possible to um, write how I feel in images. So, right now I sort of have an opportunity in my life, my emotional life, that's it's like a gift. Um, and so I've been kind of visualizing it as, God's hands like this, and then there's like a sky blue paper crane in the hands, like an origami crane. And I've just sort of been like thinking about that visual, and so I was writing about it, and then I was writing about how it's very much like, you know, as good things are planted in my head in like eggs in a nest. And then I was like, oh, like robin's egg blue. And so I had like the sky blue eggs in the nest, and then talking about, robins flying around my head as I'm thinking about these things. And so just sort of journaling these days, not so much art, but in the journaling, creating as much imagery as possible and not just the mundane, left side of the brain. These are all the labels I'm going to use and the words I'm going to codify.
Mm.
More kind of like right. brain imagery, um, and weaving and honestly, like I feel like I've never written more emotionally in touch. Because I think in pictures. Everyone thinks in pictures and GIFs and short clips and sound bites. Um, and the more wordy my internal monologue is, the more anxious I feel.
Mm.
And as I kind of lean more into thinking in images, um, I feel a lot more peaceful and at peace. And that's something I actually just realized now as I was saying it out loud.
Oh, that is magical. The way you articulated that was magical.
Oh, thank you.
The yeah, it really was. It was wonderful because even there's some I'm trying to think. I don't know whether is it in Buddhism where the labeling trees, oh, suddenly it takes the magic out of, oh, that's an oak, and and that's a bluebird, and that's a
Yeah.
robin, and suddenly then we've lost the magic just because of we've started
Mhm.
labeling things when we're actually not actually just being with the utter miraculousness of it all, with the
Mhm.
texture, the senses, the wonder, the childlike
Absolutely.
wonder,
Because as soon as you say, well, that's a bluebird, you've caught it and you put it in
yeah,
this little
box.
cage and now
Mm,
it's good. You don't have to think about it anymore. But
mm,
as soon as you start thinking about um the way that it's flying,
mm,
or this and that.
mm,
Here in up here we have a lot of bald eagles and ravens,
mm.
and from a distance they look identical. Like you can't quite tell what's a raven and what's a bald eagle
Ah,
until
wow.
you get closer. And I've just been kind of watching them more these days because as you know, I'm a guide, so I do a lot of driving the same route. And I've been kind of watching their behavior and how they act. And I've noticed that on windy days, you can tell it's a raven because it's doing a lot of loop-de-loops and flying up and down, and they're really playing in the wind. The ravens love the wind, and they're always doing these acrobatics. And ravens travel in twos and threes, I've noticed.
Right.
So if I see, you know, two birds doing acrobatics, I'm like, okay, first of all, it's windy. I don't have to get out of the car to know it's windy because the ravens are out. Second of all, they're ravens because the ravens like the wind. And when the wind is lower that day, when there's not as much wind, the bald eagles come out and they like to
Ah,
sit at the very tops of trees and um, they don't like the wind so much. So
mm,
they'll kind of like they'll glide around. And because their heads and their tails are white, when you look up, you really just see this long rectangle in the sky,
mm.
sort of just cruising along. And um, And so, like, I didn't say ravens come out when it's windy and bald eagles come out when it's not windy, because then the moment's capsulated and you're done. But
Mm,
instead, like, in these observations and these moments of being present, I don't know, I just feel like I have a deeper image of how bald eagles and ravens act. And I have a
mm,
lot of respect for both of them. And now I feel like I can think about like, okay, is it a raven day or a bald eagle day? Um, is the energy high? Like, is there a lot of wind to play with, or is it kind of more of a thoughtful day and this and that? And so just sort of working that imagery into your thought life and your journaling and
mm,
your philosophies. And exactly what you said, like as soon as you say it's a tree, well, it's over. You caught the tree.
mm,
Congratulations. No one liked that.
mm. Yeah, yeah. Do you tell the bald eagles and the ravens that you love them, though? Do you shout out, "I love you"? I love to do
I
that to
I
the birds.
I don't. That's a great practice.
Yeah.
If I
Oh.
see if a raven is like within walking talking distance, I don't tell anyone this, but you mentioned it. So if a raven is within earshot, I'll always say, "Hello, brother raven," and then move. I just
Oh.
like I do know the ravens talk to each other a lot.
Yes, they're such
They can make
intelligent
over,
beings.
they're so intelligent. They can make over 300 sounds. They
Wow.
can actually mimic human speech too. And they're always all talking to each other. And I'm like, I want them to say good things about me. Like, I want the Ravens to trust me.
I love the
I
ravens.
always said hi.
I think you can train them to go and steal things as well. Which is always
I've
like,
thought
I
about
don't
that. Um,
Just,
I don't want to
by the
commodify
by.
them, but I'm tempted.
I always feel like when we shout out to things that we look like, I do it on the
Mhm.
canal to the geese or the ducks or dogs with the people walking them. I always feel like if we're shouting out, "I love you" as much as we can, because everything is energy. We're kind of we're actually saying we it to ourselves as well. It's
Yeah.
just kind of
Yeah.
ricocheting back. I don't know. I just love. I think people think
Exactly.
I've
Yeah.
lost my marbles, but I
Good
like to.
practice. I don't
Yeah.
want those marbles anyway.
No, no, yeah, yeah. Oh dear. So you wrote that you really can be whoever you want to be. And I love that because I believe it with all of my heart that we get to write our own script and our
Hmm.
own story. And I also know that it can be quite terrifying in reinventing ourselves. How do I know what's my truth? Sometimes I go into my head about that. What's my truth? What's me? What's my old programming and conditioning and all of that?
Hmm.
I would love for you to speak on that. Have you ever been afraid of losing yourself in reinvention?
Constantly. I've kind of had so many identities. Sometimes I'm like, who am I? But- like we talked at the beginning about, how you would introduce me in this, and I'm like, I really don't know because I go by so many different, even names. So I was Michael in college because I just felt like that. Um, I've been John as a kid. I had nicknames. Now if if you see me out in Alaska and you call boat wash, I'll turn around. I'm Xiao Mai in Mandarin. It's just like I've had a lot of different identities, and even like it sounds crazy, but like costumes. I do a lot of costumes. So like when I guide, I always kind of go out in this hat, and partially because you can see a lot of old Alaskans, they're called sourdoughs, wearing that hat. And partially because when I pick people up at the airport, I want them to know what to look for. Um,
Right.
so it kind of cuts an easy image for the eyes to sort of stamp, and also kind of gives people the more Alaskan experience because we're like, well, our guide looks like all the old Alaskans in the photos, so this is authentic. Um, or when I wash boats, I always go out in like camo pants and mud boots and a sweater, and that's kind of become the costume for that identity. And I have thought about, like, yeah, but which one is me? And then I started to learn about the ego and, people who have vision quests and have experienced ego deaths, which I don't think I'm ready for. That sounds terrifying. Um, and the point of, I think, an ego death is to realize that your ego is an illusion. And, your ego is like the mask you wear. Um, and we're allowed to play with that. And so, all of those different kind of like characters I play, they're all me because they're also all not me, if that makes sense.
Mm.
Because what's important is on the inside. You grow up hearing it, and then when you get older, the same people start talking about how what's on the outside is actually more important.
Mm.
Um, gender anyway. And so uh yeah, you realize that it doesn't matter, honestly. Like it doesn't matter what your identity is because none of that's real. And you can, as long as you're being authentic about it, like as long as that's a buzzword, but as long as you mean it, I think. So as long as whoever I'm playing today, like whatever character I've decided to play for today, as long as I put absolutely everything I have into it, that's authentic and that's genuine. I'm very scared of not being genuine because
Mm.
um so I lived in Taiwan for 4 years, and Taiwanese people, they have an incredible bullshit detector. Um it's
I love that.
honestly unmatched. It's unmatched.
Wow.
And at that point I hadn't come out of the closet. I was very private about some parts of my life, and they smelled it. And I was called out daily for inauthentic. like for disingenuousness.
Wow.
Um, Somehow they didn't clock that I was gay, but everything else they clocked. And
Great.
actually, I had a coworker, one of the first people I came out to. Um, he basically we drank half a bottle of red wine, and he just started pelting me with questions. He was like, "What about this? What about this? And what about this?" And I was like, "Okay, you know what? Fine. Yeah, I like men." And he said, "Yeah, I knew it. I knew it because at work, you never talk about your personal life." And I was like, "That's so interesting that because of this one part of myself that I was hiding, it was influencing everything else about my life." And kind of as I've become more open about who I am, um, I found that a lot of other protections in my life fell down. So a lot of things I used to be guarded about, um, great example, my Instagram, it used to be only art. I would only post my artwork. So only the paintings and the portraits and the landscapes. And then you could actually, if you go back into the history of the posts, you can see how um, the more slowly out I came, the more personal my Instagram became. So I started posting pictures of my face or like what I was doing in the day or where I lived, what my job was. And so I think kind of not hiding anymore waterfalled into, okay, it's kind of safe to um, tell people about my personal life. And I did that
Mm.
partially as like a fail safe because if I tell everyone about it, no one else can find out about it.
Mm. Yeah.
So yeah, as far as losing
Yeah,
myself
fair.
and identity, I think it just doesn't matter. You know,
Yeah. I,
the best people I know are fully themselves, and it doesn't really matter what they're
mm.
wearing or who they say they are or
Mm.
whatever.
I remember reading a fantastic book by Albert Espinosa called The Yellow World some years ago. It was all about his, because I was going through cancer at the time, and it was all about his journey through cancer. And the chapter that always sticks out in my mind is when he spoke about changing. Why do we stick with the same walk and the same laughter that we've had for like, 30, 40, 50 years? Why don't we practice practice your laugh at home in the privacy of your own home, and then just go out and try out a new laugh, try out a new walk. And it's always stuck with me that I just absolutely love it. And that really plays into so much of what you've said there about just kind of go out and and actually the play aspect as well, just go out and play,
Yeah,
just have fun. Like, we're going,
absolutely.
we're not just the writer of the script, we're the costume designer and the
Mhm.
producer, and we're all of the things, the design set, all of it. So I love that.
Yeah,
um
life's a play. Just play.
yeah, yeah. It's also just fine. Well, two final actually, there might be three.
I wish it was
Oh, John,
four.
you jump onto it. There was just, you are a generation younger than me, and so I love that we've got some kind of young blood on here. And so I just wondered how your generation experience. Do you experience generation fear? Do you think, how does differently to me? Do you think, you're kind of grown up with a lot more self-branding, social media, all of that. How does fear look differently to perhaps your generation than mine, would you say?
I think for us, a lot of our fears are material because here in the US, like none of my friends are buying houses.
Mm.
It's so expensive and inaccessible for us. I mean, everyone complains about that, I think, because it's the easiest to pinpoint, oh, we can't buy houses. That what marks our generation. And I think that ties into a feeling of not belonging because physically we don't have a place where we belong. And
Mm.
so emotionally, we also feel that vibe. So I think my generation, um, I can't make general statements because it's billions of people, but if I had to guess, I would say we play with identity a lot more. than maybe our parents did, where, if I don't belong anywhere, I kind of belong everywhere and I can do whatever I want to do. So, you know what? Yeah, I am going to become a boat captain. Why not? Or, you know what? I think I am going to move to Texas for the hell of it. So we kind of, although I don't know why anyone would, but we just sort of play, we play with
Unless it's
identity more, I
Austin.
think.
That's where the cool people are.
Yeah. Um, and, and I'm trying to get back on focus.
Sorry, I'm sorry,
No,
John.
no, it's okay. There was a lot of material that happened in my head that I had to prune out. Um, but yeah, I think a lot of that also feeds into I shop in the women's section at Goodwill sometimes because like I don't know, women's sweaters just fit better on me sometimes. They're like I wore women's sneakers for 5 years straight because they just were a better fit. And I was like, yeah, I'm in the women's section and who cares? Like who gives a shit?
Mm,
And so I think we first of all, we don't have an identity that's handed to us. Um, because in what I feel is maybe the generation up, you had like the college that you went to and you studied a career that you work in now. And, we went to the colleges we could afford and we work the job that accepted us.
mm,
So, when I see, um, I went to Harvard for journalism and now I'm a journalist. Good for you. How did that happen? How did you nail that one? So we have, I think, a lot more fluid lives. And a lot of my friends, we just sort of live wherever. We just Some of my friends just went to Costa Rica for the heck of it. And I don't know, we go wherever we want, we do what we want to do, and when we're bored of it, we change it.
mm,
So I think with social media, there is, I'm actually realizing now, probably a lot more pressure to do that because you want to look cool. Um, and I think that feeds into how we play with identity as well.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other thing that I loved that you mentioned Taiwan, by the way, because I think you're learning Cantonese and Mandarin. Am I right in saying that? You're not just
So
going for
I,
you're not going for the French or Spanish. You're really going for it, John.
I gave up on Cantonese because 4 tones I can work with, 7 tones is too many. I couldn't do it.
Right. Okay.
And
And but it's
and so
Mandarin though, you're
yeah, I studied Cantonese for a few months and then eventually I was like, I think I'm good with Mandarin.
yeah.
So
Yeah, because
I really,
Mandarin's really easy, isn't it?
it's easier than Cantonese. So I actually took a trip back to Italy last year. I say back to, I've never been to Italy before then. And I have cousins there, and it was incredible. Like living in Taiwan versus, for the few weeks that I did living in Italy. Um, and I realized I had spent so many years being the other guy. Not like I wasn't like I wasn't the other man. You know what I mean? But I was like, the other. I was the white guy on the street. Um,
Mm.
and I think that affected me in ways that I didn't even realize until, you know, in Taiwan, if I complained about an issue in my life, the answer was often something like, we just need to stop worrying about it. And they're probably not even thinking that. And so, yeah, stop eating sandwiches because those are gross. I'm like, oh, yeah, you know what? You're right. I should change everything about myself. And then in Italy, I would mention something about something I was struggling with, and my cousins were just like, "Oh, amore, it's so sad. I'm so sorry." And I was like, I feel so validated. And I think because I am half Italian, like my dad's 100%. And so I grew up with some emotional language that was it kind of like connected back to that older part of me. I don't want to say like the more mean me because I just said identity is not real. But it connected with an older part of me. And I just felt
Mm.
very understood, even though I didn't speak Italian. Um,
Mm.
so that's kind of what I'm working on now. Uh, so I've kind of moved away from the Chinese languages, and I spent a month in Mexico learning Spanish, and my Spanish is rusty, but it's functional. And so I think Spanish and Italian are up next. And I kind of want to
Oh, I love
connect
that.
more with like that Western half of me.
Mm.
I'm not Chinese at all, but you know what I mean, like that Western identity.
Mm.
Um,
And just finally, we did mention that you did mention the lighten the incense before you start your journaling, because I remember reading a wonderful article on Substack by an interior designer, and she lights a candle every time she sits down to write, and that's a practice that I've now started. It kind of just sets the scene for
mm,
this is a sacred time.
yeah.
I'm kind of formulating thoughts and ideas and allowing things to come through me. You, I know sacred spaces is something important to you. I would love for you to speak a little about that on how that affects your creative kind of juices each time.
So someone once said that if you sit down to journal or create, you want to have the four elements present. And I think it's interesting that intuitively we do that. So we have um you got what? Water, fire, air, earth, where earth is people keep a plant on their desk, right? Air, we like to write in front of an open window if possible. Fire, we have a little candle going, and then we always have something to drink for the water.
Mhm.
And so I think that's kind of crucial in creating a like a safe creative space. Um, Magical or not, it's just, I think it's really interesting that it's something we do intuitively. And like, I don't want to say all religions, but a majority of religions kind of set the sacredness of their space by lighting some kind of flame. Um, the red candles in a Catholic church or incense in a temple. I don't know, something about like we have to have fire going. And I'm sure the answer to that will come to me tonight when I wake up at 2 a.m. for no reason. Um, but no, it's something about, I don't know, it's like, it's just nice. It's just a nice comfort to have.
Mm.
Um, Maybe because the act of creation involves all four elements. That might be it. Uh,
Mm.
But I don't know. There's also something about the practice of, okay, I've set my music, I have my cup. I'm just gonna light the incense, and it's also like a little timer because as the incense is going, I'm like, okay, I'm in the space right now. Um, I have this devil box. I'll put it like face down sometimes so it doesn't make noise or ask for my attention. I'm not great about doing that, but I do it. It's been face down this whole time. Um, I found if I really want to make the space extra sacred, I put the phone in a different room just so it's out of sight, out of
Mm.
mind. And I've noticed
Mm.
I don't think about it if it's not in my eyesight.
Mm.
And the other thing is I've done co-creation before. I used to have art nights at my place, which were amazing. And I've I wrote a novel with my sister in the 2000s. We worked on it together. We had this big like not three ring, like a spiral bound notebook. And like I would write a chapter and then I'd just pass it off to her and be like, okay, it's your turn. And then she would read back through what I wrote and kind of built on that. And so co-creation is fun. It's like a social practice, I think.
Mm.
But if I really want to get down to it, you know, in the beginning, creation happened in the dark and alone, you know? And I think for the same thing for us, I really like writing in the morning and at night. Um, when I was a kid, I have four brothers and sisters, and we were all homeschooled. And so it was kind of a circus all the time. And when I was a teenager, I loved when everyone went to bed because I was an insomniac. I didn't sleep. And so everyone would go to bed, and at 10 p.m., the house is quiet, it's dark, and I would open up my computer and I would just write by myself for like 2 hours, 3 hours. And I just really like people. They're my favorite thing about life. Um, But if I'm creating, y'all got to get out of here. Like
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't do well in a loud room.
Yeah.
Um, and again, that kind of plays into the whole like, okay, this is just for me. Like no one's watching right
Mm,
now. And I noticed that if I'm journaling in, because I live communally in the summer, there's a lot of people in that house. If I'm journaling, I have like a space at the table where I angle my back so the refrigerator is behind me and people can't see what I'm writing. Not
right.
because it's libel or anything, but because I just don't want them to see because I'm creating. Like I'm not done with that yet. Let
Mm,
me have my space.
yeah. Yeah.
And I also have like a table outside my room on the balcony where I sit and write. So I think, yeah, the four elements are nice to have in the running.
Mm,
It has to be isolated and you have to feel safe. I don't
mm.
have plants. I think that's the whole sentence. I just, they're a lot to take care of. And the stress of taking
And you're
care
on
of
the
them
move
kind of,
a lot.
yeah,
Yeah.
I can't have a child, I can't have a plant, I can't have a pet, nothing living that depends on me, please.
Yeah. Oh, John, it's been such a pleasure to chat and to talk. Final question, could you sum up in a few phrases or one sentence, what would your 50-year-old self be saying to you of John of 30? Oh, am I allowed to say your age?
Oh yeah, yeah, no, you can say
John
it.
of
It's fine.
33.
Oh, probably get off the damn phone.
Well, gosh, isn't that, I think that's where we're all at, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I've been trying
Yeah.
really hard lately, like we call it anti-pib. Pib is phone in bed, PIB, where
Oh,
like
okay. Right,
I have
right.
such a much better day if I wake up and I go read, or I wake up and go to my journal or this and that. And
Mm.
it's just like, yes, I have the intention set, but it's just so hard because we have like a chemical addiction to it.
It is an
Um,
addiction. Mm.
and I think it's helpful to acknowledge it as that. Like, why don't you just
Mm.
stop smoking cigarettes? Like, just do it.
Mm. Um,
So comedically, that's probably what he would say to me. And I think other than that, I think he'd probably say, just keep doing what you're doing because I think I'm on the right track.
mm.
I hope I'm
I
on the right
think
track.
you're on the right track. Oh, apart from not being on Substack, when are you going to get on Substack, John?
Okay, it's gone from here to here for me. Like it's moving to the frontal lobe.
Okay, okay.
This guiding has been intense this winter. I've been on work benders just like day after day after day. When I get home, I just want to like die and
Yeah.
relax. And I've been juggling like work with social life, with dating, with eating right, and I'm just like, I'm too
Yeah.
tired to write
And
on
you're
Substack.
creating as well.
So this
Oh
summer,
dear.
I have my vacation job, which is just washing boats. I don't have to think. I don't have to speak Mandarin. I don't have to study what year Fairbanks was founded. I can just go wash boats, come home and make art. And so then, okay, I'll get on
Yeah.
Substack this
Okay,
summer.
I'm gonna hold you to
Okay, please
it.
do.
Bless you, John. Just love you so, so much. Cherish you
Aw,
and thank you.
thank you, Susie, for this time. I had fun. It was nice.
Bless you. Thank you.